Welcome back. It is episode 132. I'm your host, Jacob Harris, and this podcast is brought to you by Achievement Apex and Power Pit Rockingham. We are now associated with Supplement Mart Rockingham as well as Ped Test Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk. Now, today I am joined by Brett Carrington, who is or has been a coach since 2012, doing face to face with clients, and is also an accredited sports nutritionist now. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, so I've been working more so on the nutrition side of things probably the last 4 to 5 years, I guess. So yeah, obviously the hands-on with my clients as well as having the credentials to be able to work specifically with them from a nutritional base as well.
When I looked into it, your accreditation was not one that I was familiar with.
Yeah, so it's governed by Sports Nutrition Australia, so it's one of the major governing bodies in regards to being insured to be able to give professional advice based off, specific macros, meal plans, things like that. You'll find a lot of these other nutrition courses often are like they call them kind of hobby courses. So, if you were to be able to, um, you know, worst case scenario, you've got the insurance to be able to kind of back you based off the protocols that you're able to give. So it's yeah, I know it's not regulated, so there are a lot of coaches that do give out a lot of advice that's probably out of their scope of practice. But for me to be able to showcase that and to be able to illustrate that within my accreditation and stuff like that, it carries my kind of professionalism a lot further.
Yeah, so I'm familiar. I'm actually familiar with that course. I think maybe what I'm referring to was an older qualification or what you started with. So because you did a
Oh
double.
yes, yeah. So that there is obviously my nutrition side of things. But I studied at university for 5 years as well prior to actually jumping straight into the personal training that. So I've got a degree in sport and exercise prescription. So studied at Otago University in South Island, New Zealand, and also came out with a degree in marketing as well with that. So yeah, I'm a little bit more uh, educated than some of the cereal box qualifications that are given out there. Some might say, but it really does kind of add to my repertoire of what I'm able to do, not only just from the education standpoint, but the skills that I'm able to illustrate via you know, study or communication or speeches or that kind of stuff too, which you govern a lot from university experience.
Yeah, I think it's a common thing now as well to somewhat shit on qualifications a little bit. I've noticed there's a lot of people out there now that's sort of I don't know, maybe not. It's not necessarily that people are saying they're a bad idea, but I think it's coincidental that people are all in agreement that it's
Yes.
not needed. You know what I mean? It's kind of like people are like, oh well, as long as you know what you're talking about and you can deliver a service, that's important. It's like there's definitely something to that for sure because there's people that are qualified that aren't good at it. But I also
Yeah.
think maybe we're going to end up being a little bit too far in the other direction where no one needs to be qualified because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure. Like we've got a lot of TikTok and Instagram gurus these days, but in saying that though, like the like free information out there these days, you know, is coming from very like creditable coaches and people that have been in the game for a long period of time. But you can cut through the weeds pretty quickly with a lot of younger people. I'd say I feel like I'm a bit older these days, um, where it's just basically like regurgitation of just what you kind of hear and see. And a lot of it though is comes down to, don't get me wrong, you could be a very you have a lot of skills from like a training standpoint or a nutrition standpoint, but from like a actual maturity standpoint, that's I think a differentiation factor or differentiating factor between a lot of coaches that have been in it for a long time, that have done the qualifications, that maybe have a larger kind of history of gaining that accreditation in different areas.
Yeah, I think there's both sides to it for sure, and
Mm,
and 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 it does just kind of come down to who you're listening to as well. I think
of course.
TikTok as you mentioned, it's a rough place when it comes to education. I personally wouldn't navigate through it to learn anything. I
Yeah,
have it to try to, I put snippets out on
of
it, but I
course.
honestly forget I have it because for me, it's just not an app I can tolerate very well. It's
Yeah, for
very,
sure.
I feel like I'm not even pressing buttons and it's just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
doing its own thing.
yeah, for sure.
But for some of the stuff that you do, it's probably really good. And I guess this is what we're talking about. Everyone's doing it differently. When did you really kick off the recipe video stuff and like the comparison stuff? Because I feel like that's a big part of what's growing your page, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was doing like, I don't want to say it, but I was doing like calorie comparisons before. Fuck, I would say like maybe 6 years ago, and I was like, I was literally like screenshotting them, and it was like off images of the internet, and then putting them onto like the stories on Instagram. Then I'll screenshot that, and then I'll use that as my post on um Instagram itself. So if you look back on my old post like 5, 6 years ago, it's the graphics are fucking terrible, but it's literally the same information that's being translated today, but it's just way more entertaining. Like it's the trip to KFC to get the burger, and then it's a trip to Grilled to get this one, and then it's like grabbing out of the bag and comparing it. Whereas my back in the day, I was just like screenshot this, screenshot that. This is this many calories. This is this many calories. You can't, low carb isn't bad for you. And I think these days, but it's the same thing. Like if you look at like the barbell back squat, right? It's fucking the same technique that's been used for decades and decades and decades. But for some reason, it's not for some reason. We just know that it's way more entertaining where you see these beautiful graphics and it's like a hot chick doing it or whatever as well. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing, it's just being replicated today, but in a way more digestible way. And I think just at the forefront of bringing more light to some of those things from calorie comparisons, calorie density of certain foods, food swaps, and all that kind of thing. Really kind of pushed, I guess, my page a little bit further out there, I guess, to people.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit more friendly for people's eyes to click on, right? Especially when, as you said, you've gone from screenshotting things to,
Yeah, for sure.
like you've got to get the hook in, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's
It's
so much
yeah.
more to think about these days, right? So, but yeah, that's definitely but it's something that I really kind of enjoyed. And when, you know, my introduction to kind of flexible dieting started that when I first started competing in bodybuilding and stuff. So I've had some pretty cool mentors that like from back in say 2000 and I think it was 2014, 2015. They kind of introduced me to, MyFitnessPal tracking, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of felt there was that gap in the industry where there was the bro science side of bodybuilding, and then there was this new kind of era of being able to enjoy different foods and stuff like that. And then I found that approach was really kind of highlighted through the general public as well, where it was the good or the bad foods or this or that. And obviously, there's been a lot more kind of education across the last 10 or so years with that, and being able to the meta-analyses and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's just trying to showcase to people that there's no good or bad foods. Energy awareness is super important if your goal is fat loss or muscle gain, but it's trying to portray it in a way that's very digestible just to the everyday person. And for me, that is super important. I'm not like I really use these crazy words or scientific language and stuff like that because I don't dive into those. That's not my audience. My audience is just everyday people that are wanting to lose weight, feel their best, get strong, build muscle, enjoy a few beers on the weekend, go out for a few wines and eat some food together, not feel guilty, but still be able to stay on track. And I felt through those original infographics and stuff like that, it started kind of bridging that gap a little bit.
Yeah. So the interesting point there, I guess, is the good foods, bad foods situation,
Yes.
because that's a big one I find, and there's a lot of different outlooks on that, and sometimes I struggle with it myself. I think
Yeah.
because to an extent, there's got to be some bad foods, right? There has to be some stuff that we probably shouldn't consume as human beings, right? Because I used to love the Golden Gaytime Crushers from
Yeah,
KFC, but that's got to be a bad food, right? That's like we have to have some like Skittles. Skittles, it's got to be bad
sure.
food, right? Surely.
This is something that Lane Norton always talks about, and he's called like the poisons in the dose, not necessarily like those foods by themselves. And when you look at things individually in certain quantities and things, I think it's quite healthy from a mindset standpoint anyway, because the way that we look at, sure, this is the best way that I feel like. There's no such thing as good or bad foods. It's just foods that are probably more like um, health focused, or nutrition focused from that body. And there's probably foods that are more like indulgence, good for the soul. So soul foods to a certain extent as well. And having a healthy bridge between the both of them, we always talk about the 80-20 principle. 80% wholesome, nutrient-rich food, 20% fun foods or whatever as well. Because I think where people start associating good or bad, it's like if you have some of these foods, you'll fucked your diet, or it's going to create some particular. And this is where the fear mongering comes from a lot of people on social media, TikTok, and whatever. They find this one kind of like case study, and then they just fucking run with it. Coca-Cola is going to give you cancer. Carbs are going to make you fat. All artificial sweeteners. All this kind of stuff. So I think being able to kind of like numb out a lot of the bullshit and actually find out what actually the science says. And the science does say in moderation, like anything's actually okay, unless you're on like meth or something, but that's not what we want. But like you don't want to say this is good or this is bad. You can more so approach it like this is more nutritionally rich for me. It's got more micronutrients. It's healthier in that extent. But this here, if you're focused on enjoying that for the sake of it being an indulgence, you want to enjoy a social occasion, have it because you could say, right, you go to your mum's birthday or your dad's birthday or whoever it is, someone's very important to you, and you choose to not have any cake because you think it's like bad for you, and that kind of stems this whole thing. And I'm like, it's a very important special occasion. You would love to taste a piece of cake that's very like for a birthday or something like that and experience that with people as well. So there's a big difference between like, choosing that cake because you're emotionally stressed at home and you're sitting on the couch by yourself and you're just going to it to kind of fill this emotional void, as opposed to having that cake as a choice because you want to experience it, you want to enjoy it and stuff like that. So that's where I say like there's no such thing as good or bad foods. It's just obviously sometimes the context that it's in. And obviously there's foods that obviously are a bit more health seeking in that sense, if that kind of makes sense a little bit.
But yeah, it does. I think it's probably the most appropriate way to look at it, or at least a middle ground for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And there is, because there is the thing as well with like flexible dieting where you go too far the other way and people are so flexible that their goal is to fit as much shit into their diet as possible because all I have to do is hit my macros and my calories and I'll hit there. But it's like, no, there does need to be a health seeking focus. That should be, 80% of your diet should be like that, right? You start with like, where you're getting your fruit and vegetables from, where you're getting your protein from, that kind of thing as well. And then you can kind of fill the gaps in with a bit of fun foods here and there. But yeah, it is having uh, that kind of uh, balance to a certain extent as well, and that general awareness.
So, what do you think about the idea behind not needing it? Because that's probably the bigger argument as well from a lot of people these days, right? I'm sure you've
Yeah,
scrolled through Instagram and seen someone with an enormously large breadboard with five
yeah,
eggs on it and a bunch of butter and oil
yeah,
and
yeah,
steak,
yeah,
telling
yeah,
you
for
that's their
sure.
only way to eat. And
They happen
it's
to be from Bondi Beach. Okay.
possibly, but I mean, it's becoming more common, right? And
Sure.
I I'm in a few different circles. So I got like bodybuilder mates who are like carbs all day.
Yeah,
Tim, who I work with, there's literally just like lollies and Gatorades everywhere in this gym.
Yeah,
And then I go down and, do a jujitsu class or something, and I'm surrounded by
sure,
like five dudes who like all do carnivore diets and have ice baths. And
sure.
so everyone's different, and we know that. But I guess the idea for some people, and I hear the argument you've made, and I do that with a lot of my clients, but the idea, I guess, for a lot of people is you're saying things like, oh, well, if that person doesn't get to have that cake because they think it's bad for them, and the mindset behind it, there was a very long period of time, and not even long ago, right? Some people will go, oh, 10,000 years ago, we didn't do that. And that's a bit of a
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
argument because we did a lot of
sure.
different stuff 10,000 years ago.
Yeah,
We fought mountain lions, and I'd prefer to still not fight one now. But
of course.
the idea is even 50 to maybe 80 years ago, things were very different. And the idea was like people didn't need cake then. Some people got through their life without indulging anywhere near as much as people do now.
Sure.
Do you think there's a level of people just doing more of it now simply because we have more access to it? Like, do we really need to indulge or do we need a beer, a couple of beers every weekend and a pub feed, or, even a fortnight? Do people really need it as much as we kind of think that they do, or are people just justifying it because we simply have access to it?
I think it's very individual based, right? Like where your kind of values lie and why you would choose to kind of like have this, you know? Not everybody wants to be this health God sent fucking, bodybuilder or, wants to be this person who goes and takes off their shoes and earths every morning and stuff like that. But I would highly think, of course, we have the issue is that we've just got way more access to these highly palatable foods, right? So it's kind of like, should you take your phone off your child or a young person because there are people out there that are, for example, using it for the wrong reasons. So there's obviously these certain things that definitely have negative kind of views or connotations around it, but it doesn't mean we should completely avoid it. It does mean that we should be more aware about these types of foods, and more so the fact than anything, the issue with these types of foods that are highly processed and whatever, it's the fact that they're just fucking easy to eat and easy to overconsume on. Um, as I said, by themselves, they're not inherently like bad for you or going to create, but if you overconsume on them, which leads to health issues because you're either overweight or you're not prioritizing your micronutrients through fruit, vegetables, protein, and you're making more space for shitty foods, then that is an issue. But like I said, if people are more conscious of that 80-20 principle, which sounds pretty fucking like um, you know, it's pretty basic. Like, but if you look at your shopping trolley, if you next time you go to a shopping trolley and look at it and see, is 80% of your groceries in there? Is it like fruit, vegetables, or is it more like, you know, chocolate, ice cream, LCM bars, muffins, stuff like that? Then maybe we need to start kind of like, and this is the thing, it's not like clear cut, like you have to do this or you have to do that, because a lot of people, the reason they struggle is because they find it very hard to start changing those behaviors over time. And when you can start telling people or just drip feeding them, this is what you want to work on this week, let's increase your protein intake or let's increase your fruit or whatever, you can start kind of like changing those behaviors. And you'll probably do it with your clients with like habit stacking and just, it comes down to behavior. So though, yes, it's not like those foods, as I said, are inherently bad for us. We have much more access to them, so it's quite a lot easier to overconsume on them and purchase them because they're very affordable comparative to some things. But I think just as I said, just my job and probably your job as well is just to try and make it as simple as possible to try and get those very basic messages across, because it's not as black and white as a lot of people think.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as you said, it's a person by person situation anyway. Some people are going to be a little bit more willing to
Yes.
not worry about certain things, and also you would find it as well with clients, especially if someone wants to lose a significant amount of weight to begin with, they might have more flexibility, but as you move on and your calories start to get lower, if
Yes.
you're on possibly 1,500 to 1,600 calories a day, and let's say we're just talking about like an average size female or something,
Yeah.
you don't you're probably going to make better choices just because you look at your budget. If you want to look at
Yes.
your calorie
Yeah.
budget, and you're going to go, well, I don't really want to waste 300 calories on this because I can eat so much. I'm not going to have 350 calories of like a protein shake and a protein bar where I'm out, because if I just wait now, when I get home, I can have a whole bunch of like Spud Light potatoes and some
Yeah.
chicken or some steak.
Sure.
And that's a big thing for people, I think, learning that, right? Is learning that actually, you know, this is convenient, or this is, this is maybe easier, but
Yeah.
once I'm sitting there with a big like plate of food in front of me, I'm going to be happier I chose this.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say there's kind of two ways to look at it. And I used to be a huge advocate of, um, the high volume, and I still push that, like high volume foods, high in protein is going to keep you fuller for longer as well. But I am also making people lean into the fact that, high volume, low calorie is not always the best, whether it comes with like gut issues and stuff like that. And it's something that I've, probably more so evolved on the last few years. But like you said, from those initial posts that I used to put up, you could have this, or you could have that, for example. Like, you could have 3 tubs of, it used to be Bitlado instead of like 1 tub of, this, that kind of thing. But it's not like you're gonna have 3 tubs of ice cream. I think it was more so about the fact that this is how much calories it's worth. It's probably not going to keep you full for that long. So there may be better choices for you at this point. And like I said to you before, it's not that, that protein shake or that protein bar or that muffin is bad for you. But the fact is, at the moment, are you struggling with hunger? Yes. Are you struggling to adhere? Yes. All right. These types of foods, fruit, vegetables, are more calorie conscious. They're going to keep you fuller for longer. So this may be best for you at this point in time. Because the thing is, there are people that would be like, that are dieting and they may be on lower calories and they're like, fuck it, I'm going to have that Mars bar. And then, they just work the rest of their day around it. It's not the end of the world, but someone that probably didn't have that viewpoint may have had that Mars bar and I think they fucked up their whole day as well. So, as we kind of alluded to, it is very individual dependent upon how you address those particular situations. And this is why working with a coach, and a coach being able to work with a client individually and not give, like I said, these blanket statements like you have to do this or you have to follow that. Because, I do have some clients who prefer to follow a meal plan. I've got some clients that just prefer to follow macros, or some clients that prefer to do like a hybrid approach. And a good coach will be able to work with the client collaboratively to find the best approach for them, as opposed to the client having to mold to what the coach has to tell. Oh, it is like this is it, and that's it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably maybe the biggest realization I had maybe over the last 3 to 5 years was just simply that it's just a game of individual uh,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
approaches and specificity, right? You just have people who I have people who are fine with it. I have people who are
Yeah,
like, no, like I'll just eat
yeah,
like grass-fed steak and broccolini and stuff like that. And I'm like, cool. Like if you enjoy that, man, or you want to pay that extra money or you want to do that. And then I have other
yeah,
clients who are just like, I just want to like have a like chicken and cheese like toasty. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I mean, I like to use this bread because it's a little bit low calorie. And then they're like, oh
yeah,
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 cool.
for
Wow,
sure.
that now I can have two. So you have two completely different people, but it
Exactly.
works for both of them.
Yeah.
And
So like, yeah, but even like for some people, for example, if they told me they were intermittent fasting, for example, right?
mm,
Um, I won't be like, to a client, I wouldn't be straight up and be like, it doesn't really matter whether you intermittent fast or not, like as long as calories equated. If it was somebody that came to me, I would be more inclined to be, all right, what's your particular reasoning? Why do you like to intermittent fast? And if they were to say, oh, I heard it burns more fat, then it gives me a segue to be able to come in and be able to explain certain things. Or if they were to say, So, the one of the oldest ones, I can't have carbs after 6 p.m. Like, I don't want to have that in my meal plan. I'm like, all right, that's interesting. Why do you think that? So one of the biggest things that I found with, being a coach as of late, probably the last 3 or 4 years, is, really client focused and really asking clients, why they think that particular way. Because we know why these things all work as a coach. We're educated in our space, but I even myself guilty 5, 6, 7 years ago. You kind of like they'll tell you why they're doing something, and you're like, no, that's bullshit. This why, and it kind of already puts a bit of a front between you and the client. So you want to kind of break down those barriers, and like I said, there's so much stuff out there on TikTok and Instagram. These people aren't aware of a lot of things. It's just our job as qualified coaches, nutritionists, etc. It's to be able to kind of provide them with our education based off it, but not completely shut them down. Why? This is what the research says. You can still enjoy carbohydrates after 6 p.m. It doesn't actually, and they're like, oh, okay. So when you break that down, it kind of breaks that particular, like that fear mongering down as well, which I've heard a lot of in the past. And, one person that you can say is not a keto is a lot. You can kind of, it's a win for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a client who's doing intermittent fasting at the moment, and
Mm.
my response was just like, yeah, cool, if that works for you. And
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
the only response for me was, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, that his window is because he has children, so he wakes up in the morning and eats around like 6, but then stops eating at 2 in the afternoon. And
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of anyone doing it that way because I
You
used to
go.
do it, and it was you always
Yeah.
eat in the afternoon, right? Because you want
Yeah,
to eat,
sure.
you just rather most people, I'd say, I know people who just literally just like they don't even say they're intermittent fasting. They're just like, oh yeah, I just don't eat breakfast.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
to me, I was like, this is like the most backwards way I've ever heard. And I was like, do you get hungry? And he's like, nah. And I was like, you're not
Yeah.
even after 2 p.m. up until 9 o'clock at night when you go to sleep, you're not hungry. And he's like, nah, not really. And I was just like, man, if that works for you, I'm not
Yeah.
going to try and change it.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And like you said, like people are more inclined to, go lower carb because they prefer that. Or like you said, they prefer to do intermittent fasting, quote unquote, just for the sake of fucking fits in there, and they're just not a hungry person. It would just be an issue if that client of yours was like, man, I'm fucking fasting during the day, but my training performance, like training in the morning and the performance is real shit. Then you'd be like, all right, you may need to include some carbohydrates around your training session, blah, 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 and explain that. But if, as you said, if it does work for them in that extent, um, but again, it's like asking the question why, giving them, our reasoning, how that works, actually giving them the evidence, and then them being able to, because when you do that, you create a much stronger relationship with your clients as well, or people in general, whether it's through social media, Instagram posts, TikTok, whatever as well.
Yeah, I've always been big on being open minded and having that approach. And I think you're right. Like it definitely just makes people find you more approachable, and
Yeah,
they're more likely to be open with you as well,
yeah,
and like be honest with you, because
yeah,
otherwise you just have
exactly.
people who try to lie about stuff, and then that just makes
Yeah,
it
yeah,
hard for both of you.
yeah,
Um,
exactly right.
one of the things you've mentioned before on Instagram, you did a video on food pairing, which I
Yeah.
was interested in. So, I mean, for maybe anyone who hasn't seen that, or doesn't really understand what that is, could you maybe explain that? And then I guess maybe I would like to hear your thoughts on how effective you believe that is.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, food pairing is something that you basically you pair two particular foods, one that may be not so micronutriently rich, okay? So, and you may pair it with something that is more nutrition rich, or I guess to a certain extent. So what it could be, for example, it could be the fact that depending upon, you don't know if you're full or you're just peckish, or whether you're a bit hungry, you're unsure. So, you've got a chocolate bar in your pantry, and you don't know whether you should have it or not based off the fact, do I want it because I'm hungry or not? And basically all I would say is that prior to having that chocolate bar, have a piece of fruit, or grab something else that's a bit more nutritionally rich. And if you still want to have that Mars bar after that piece of fruit, go for it. Okay. So what it does, I find with a lot of people, first thing first, it gets people to actually think about whether they're actually hungry for that chocolate bar or not. Because a lot of people, they react from like more of an emotional sense to a lot of those highly palatable foods. Okay, they don't really kind of there's like no gap between how they feel and the action that's taking place. So when you kind of put like a pause stamp in it, which is going to be, at least they get a piece of fruit in or whatever, they often will kind of get through that and they're more inclined to be like, I'm actually not that. I actually don't feel like a chocolate bar. I just needed that time to kind of think about things. You ate a piece of fruit anyway, which is, good amount of fiber, some good micronutrients in it as well. But on the other hand, if you ate the piece of fruit and you still want the chocolate bar, fucking just have the chocolate bar. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it just makes people think about things for a little bit. And obviously, by no means it was like hugely scientifically like based, but I've seen a huge kind of, a good win with a lot of clients and even myself when I apply it in everyday life as well.
Yeah, it's the concept, of course, makes sense, and for the right people, I think it will work really well. I think the the hunger side of things is where it gets difficult because obviously some people deal with it a lot worse than others,
Sure.
and that's
Yeah.
kind of when they have that binge,
Yeah.
and it's they don't because that's what a lot of people say, right? You go, oh well, you can just have three. Well, you would hear this probably even more than me, right? It's like, oh, you can have four pieces of that chocolate bar or block, and you can have that chocolate bar, and then almost always the response is, oh, but I don't want four pieces. I want the whole thing,
Yeah.
and it's,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's like, well, there's probably 900, 1100 calories in that whole block of chocolate. So I don't really have much advice to you, for you because that's probably never going to fit in your day. You're just probably going to have to do that as a once off. But you're going to have to understand that if you do that all the time, chances are you're just not going to be able to reach your goals. And that's a tough conversation because once again, people don't really want to hear that, and then so they just kind of ignore it. And then I have a lot of people in my life who have no approach similar to mine. Like there's not a single thing between our lives that match up. I have mates who we're good friends, but
Yeah.
our diets, our activity levels, our lifestyles, the way we take care of ourselves in every aspect is completely different.
Yeah.
And they're just not interested in hearing it. So it's like that's fine, but that's where I think it becomes more difficult to, and this is where we struggle in this industry. And a lot of the
Sure.
information you're giving out is good information, but obviously there's just so many people that just don't want to hear it, right? Like
Yeah. And
it's
I think if we like, because the biggest thing, if we look at like overeating or like disorder eating or even binge eating, um, it's it goes more than the fact that they just want that block of chocolate. So you can't just say to people, say for example, if they are on a fat loss journey or whatever, and they just there's something more than them just craving chocolate that's making them do that. Or, some people say, well, if you don't want it bad enough, like, that's it. You just don't want it bad enough. But I think again, from a coaching perspective, it's kind of stripping things back again. It's like, what is leading to that behavior of wanting a whole block of chocolate? And, a few things that could be in place is the fact that they've always perceived chocolate as bad. So when they actually get the opportunity to have it, they fucking just eat the whole thing like there'll be no chocolate tomorrow. But if you were to say to that client, hey, how would you feel if we included 4 squares of chocolate a day? Every day you can include it in your diet. Do you think that, would that be something you'd be interested in? And they'll be like, oh, what? I can have fucking chocolate every day. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, you can. Well, we obviously make it fit within your calorie target, but what it does, it actually reduces that novelty factor. So, the next time that there's a whole block of chocolate, because they have it every day, it's not as like tempting to eat a whole block as well. Um, and then something else could be the fact that we may look into their, how is their fruit and vegetable intake and protein intake throughout the rest of the day? Are they quite, if they're a flexible diet, there's not much fiber in their diet, so which may increase their hunger throughout the rest of the day. So they get to the end of the day and they're just so ravenous that if the chocolate bar is there, they eat the whole fucking thing. But if they were, prioritizing, 3 to 4 serves of protein throughout the day, 300 grams of veggies, 2 pieces of fruit, those hunger cravings may be reduced as well, so that when they get to that chocolate bar, they may not gorge the whole thing because they're actually full. Is it an emotional response? Is something, stressing them out, that becomes the caveat. Okay. If you next time you feel stressed, instead of going to the going for a block of chocolate, you may just, all I want you to do is fucking just go walk outside for 1 minute. That's all you gotta do. 1 minute, just go walk around the house and come back in. If you want the chocolate bar, still have it. But I guarantee you in that 1 minute, it's giving you enough time to digest those thoughts and those emotions. And you probably have made the decision, hey, I probably don't need that chocolate bar. Now, obviously, this is very individual opinion, and I'm just making these kind of things up from clients I've worked with in the past and how it's worked. But again, like it's kind of stripping it all back and just working with those clients individually and hoping, not hoping, but finding the best solution for them individually.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, as you said, it's the individual side of things as well, but it's different methods and different trialing those things with different
Yeah,
people.
exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. 100%.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
like you got friends that gonna live completely separate lives and stuff like that. So it's just trying to, if they've like mentioned to you that they would like to, lose body fat or stuff or whatever, some of their behaviors need to change, and it could be, addressing some of those things.
Yeah, I think I mean, so I have one or two British friends. They're very supportive of what I do, but they're
Yeah, of course.
they're they're very one of my friends is just super comfortable with the way he lives. He just doesn't eat until night time, and when he does eat, he just eats what he wants. And he's like, I don't have any health problems, so I'm all right. And I'm like, hey
Yeah,
man,
yeah,
if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
yeah,
But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think part as a follow up, and this is probably just me personally being interested, but in situations when people get down to fairly low calories, or let's say someone's at a point where they need to really be, uh, I guess, like you said, that they're prioritizing protein more, maybe their fat's quite low.
yeah.
It's quite hard to fit these sorts of things in. Like, do you find that people eventually get to a point where maybe you've got their calories quite low and you do have to sort of say to them,
Yeah,
look,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I think of it like a dimming switch, right? Like when you're on more calories, you can turn that up. When you're actually like, when you're on lower calories, you obviously there's less room for flexibility to a certain extent. I'll never say you can't be flexible, but yes, if you are getting to the tail end of a dieting phase and you are getting leaner, there's less margin for error as well. So, and what foods are going to keep you fuller for longer? As I said, more wholesome, nutrient-rich foods, etc. as well, and the highly palatable, quote unquote, like processed foods. Um, so yeah, there is that dimming switch that does need to come into play as you get lower and lower on calories as well. But as I said, it's not to say it can't be flexible, but flexibility does need to be less as you do get further into that, like the grinding end, I guess.
and so maybe as a bit of perspective, just out of interest, what's some of the lowest calories you've dealt with personally? Because you've competed a few times. That's right.
Yeah, for sure. So me personally, like I've, everybody's very individual, for example. So even for myself, like, on like prior to prep, I may have gotten down, oh sorry, just before show day, getting down to maybe 1700 calories um per day. And then, people are like, well, that's, super low. But then I'm like, well, you hear about like Chris Bumstead, who's like, you know, Mr. Olympia, classic physique champion. He's like, I don't know, 105, 110 kilos shredded on stage, and he's on 1400 calories, leading into that. Don't get me wrong, like he gets to a certain percentage, but that's the extreme end of things.
Mm.
Um, but some people, it's I think there's a huge thing, and you've probably seen it lately as well, where coaches use how many calories their clients are on um as like a boasting kind of like claim, like, oh, my client had to, they dieted on 2000 calories, like I got them up to 4000. And then you get clients that come to you, I'm like, why can't I diet? I'm like, well, that's not you. Like,
Mm.
you unfortunately, like, you're a smaller person, first of all, you're not as active. You do have to diet like under 1600 calories or even lower. But again, if that's what you want, you will need to do that to be able to get there. Don't get me wrong, like some people have spent a lot of their years yo-yo dieting and their metabolism may not be as great as it could be. But at the end of the day, people's metabolism don't actually change as much as a lot of people think. So a lot of it's just based off like general activity. When you increase muscle mass to a certain extent. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, do you think that's where maybe some of the confusion comes from, right? A lot of that kind of have got a slow metabolism and things like that when people are just not really taught variables between people. It's really just that your body may utilize calories less efficiently. Your output
Yeah,
isn't efficient as someone else's. And some
exactly.
people do have better genetics for muscle building and things like that
Yeah,
too. So if someone's got a lot more muscle on them, they're probably going to
yeah.
be able to get away with more food than you. Do you think that's maybe just something that in the future we'll hopefully have a better understanding of, like I guess through society, because
Yeah,
we still have people say it now, right? That's I've got a
yeah,
slow
yeah, for sure.
metabolism. That's still a thing.
For sure. And I think it's been debunked like, you know, that many times, and often it's you have a lot of you know, females a little bit later in life, say, my metabolism's broken or whatever. And the fact is they just don't move as much as they used to in their 20s, and those, you know, four margaritas on a Friday afternoon and that whole platter that they demolished on a Sunday Arvo, they don't take into account those type of things too. Um, yeah, so I think it's definitely like, again, like our job to make people more aware of that. And the other thing too that people don't understand as well, when it's breaking down those or opening their eyes up, this is where the calorie comparisons can often help. It's being like that coffee that you're having and that muffin, it's just a little snack for morning tea. It's like 1,000 calories. It's like two-thirds of your calorie intake just in that. So when people start becoming a little bit more educated around that, then you can kind of break down the fact that the metabolism isn't broken. They just don't move as much as they used to, and they're over consuming on foods that they don't really think too much of as well. And this is like the sugar in their coffees, the oil that they use with the cooking with, the alcohol on the weekend, all that kind of stuff. If people can be a little bit more, if they treated the way that they took in calories the way that a business takes in money, you'd be a bit more aware of like, how much you're bringing in as well. So though I say like, some people are on meal plans, some people prefer to do meal plans. I still think that there's a premise needed around like the general understanding of like calories and whatever. Because I know I've got plenty of clients that are like, fuck, I don't want to be sitting there using my fitness pal all the time. I'm like, and that's fair enough. I don't expect people to be using it for the rest of their lives, but for a short period of time or, giving them some education behind it, will give them the tools to be able to apply that in the long term and make it more sustainable as well.
That was going to be one of my questions in terms of like counting food, because that's something I've had to
Sure.
get across to people in my life, whether it was a partner or like other clients that I've had where they've I had to encourage them, like, I do want you to go through a period of not worrying about it. And then they're
Yeah.
sort of like, oh, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, like, let's say we've gotten to the end of a fat loss phase, or you've just maybe you're deep into one. And I'm like, look, just on this Sunday, eat normally in the morning, but then like when you go out for some food in the afternoon, just leave your phone. Just don't worry about what's in the food. Don't worry about how much it weighs or
Yeah.
anything. Just like eat something and just don't worry about it for a little bit. And for some people, that's really hard to,
Yeah, for
that
sure.
it's just as much of a struggle for some people to start counting as it is for other people to stop.
For sure.
It's just that kind of understanding where you should, as you said, like if you've been counting for sort of like 2 years of, food to an extent, you should have a pretty good idea of what's in stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's, you should be, I know I can. I know I don't need
Yeah.
if I'm looking at half a kilo of strawberries versus like 100 grams, I'm not like, like I've got a pretty good idea of the differences between them. So
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes I've done it where I just haven't tracked it. And then
yeah,
2 weeks later, my weight's lower. And then, someone could sit there and go, well, why didn't you track it? It's just like, because it didn't even really affect me. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
for
would have
sure.
been, would have been different if that was maybe walnuts or,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know,
of course.
but yeah, I
Uh,
think that like 50 calories or 20 calories isn't going to make a difference at that level. And that's where I think people kind of, like you said, maybe they don't want to count or they because they think they're automatically going to be at that level. Where, as you said, it's like, well, this could just be a general guide for you to begin with, and that's the difficult part I think for a lot of people. And I think now, like, I don't know, MyFitnessPal probably seems to be the most popular one. I use Chronometer.
yeah,
There's a couple other like ones that
I
clients
think
have
it's
told me about.
like Macro Factor. I think was a new one.
I've heard of that. I've heard that's pretty good.
Yeah, so I think that was like, that was built by, I think it was like Jeff Nippert and a few other like top tier like bodybuilder guys. But
Oh yeah.
I think like Eugene Teo, he's got one on his Gambaro method, it's called, and it's what it actually does. It actually teaches people like the old school like palm size for protein, thumb like vegetables, and like some people can opt for that way to do it as well. And I think they may do that in trainer eyes as well, to a certain extent. But yeah, as you alluded to, I think it does, if you want it to be long term and sustainable, there does need to be some active means of wanting to like learn the education side to a certain degree. You don't have to be a fucking absolute MyFitnessPal guru or whatever, but if you understand, that salmon is way higher in calories than chicken breast, or that, you know, having a full sugar Coke is, 150 calories, and then having the no sugar. If you can apply those types of things over the long term, it's pretty easy to maintain and sustain your body weight, with those very basic principles. So again, if your diet's filled with 80 to 20% of whole foods, if you're having 3 to 4 servings of protein per day, 2 pieces of fruit, 300 grams plus of veggies, um, and you kind of have a rough idea, like from like learning a little bit about the calories of certain foods through a short period of maybe using MyFitnessPal or something or other, um, it's just going to make outside of those. And then again, you can use that dial again if you do need to get in photo shoot condition, or you do want to drop some weight for summer. Then you just turn that button up again. You're that dial, and you become more acute. So you may bring MyFitnessPal out again, be a bit more accurate with that. So as I said, there's a bit of a scope or a timeline on that for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you said, it just depends on the goal with it. Some people get so caught up
Yeah,
in
for
in
sure.
these details, and it's funny, man. It's funny when
Yeah.
someone like I literally remember sitting with it was a guy that I worked with, and he was drinking like a Jack Daniels, and he was like, "Oh, is it true that like I can't remember actually. Maybe it was like it was something real funny. It was like a herb
Oh,
something
right.
or like cinnamon or something, and he was like, "Is it true that will like kickstart my metabolism?" And I was like, "Brother, you got a 300 calories worth of Jack Daniels and Coke in your
Yeah.
hand. You do not need to worry about kickstarting your metabolism. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
people
for sure.
focusing on the finer details
Yeah.
before they're even considering just the main stuff. And I think that's where like the tracking comes into people. They're like, "Oh, that's complicated," and you're like, "It's actually like funny because it's kind of what you're already doing,
Yeah.
and you can just continue doing that if you want." But you just need it like by doing this, it just means that you can literally go like if you wanted to, right? You could sit there on MyFitnessPal and be like, all right, one Jack Daniels, two things of from McDonald's, this thing. It would make up your numbers, right? Probably wouldn't be a good idea for you. But at
Yeah.
least if you did that, you could top it up and then stop and not
Yeah,
go
yeah, for sure.
further than that. You probably feel like shit. But I imagine if
Yeah.
you're eating and drinking like that, you probably feel like shit anyway. I know I did.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so it's like it's an interesting thing. I just think more or less in the future and stuff, it'd be cool. I don't know if you'd ever. I remember seeing a thing on it once. There was just a movie that came out maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. Decent movie. It was okay. It was called Anon, and it had Clive Owen and Amanda.
I don't know.
I can't remember her last name in it, but I'll send you like the clip from it, man. I just thought it was really cool. The
Yeah.
movie was about crime and all that, but there was this one little thing where they would have like a recording device behind their eye. And when she's sitting there, you can see it from her perspective. And when she looks down at her food, because it's futuristic and everything's tracked, in the food, it actually comes up and it's got tomato and there's some eggs or something. And off the tomato, it says, 87% water, 3 grams of carbohydrates, and it has like this mad
Yeah, you're
inbuilt
right.
thing.
Yep.
And it almost, well, I've thought about it before, I doubt we'll ever get to that point, and maybe it's kind of just this like weird, far-fetched imagination that I have. But it kind of interests me if we'd ever get to a point in the future where maybe like you could track it. You'd like to think we'd get to a point where you track it like easier than we do now, right? Like if we have apps for it now, you'd think in the future someone would maybe try to create something where you can just scan something and it's on your wrist or something, and then it just tells you when you've had enough food, or you maybe need a little bit more of this, or like surely that's coming, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. Like things were like I wouldn't be surprised if it's already out there. I'm not sure if I've heard or whatever, but like taking a photo of your, I'm pretty sure it is. You can take a photo of your food and it will I think maybe Macro Factor does it, but you could take a photo of your food and it will give you a rough estimate of the calories in that meal. Like obviously it's not super accurate, but yeah, again, it depends upon the way that you want to take it because, you know, that hyper focus on certain things can really create, like you're talking about, like people struggle to leave MyFitnessPal, and some people just can't be bothered doing it as well. So, I think there'll be that. Anything with technology, right? There's always that crossover. Is it too much? Is it like these driving cars at the moment? Is it too much that we're getting driven around by the vehicles themselves? Or whatever. But people just want convenience, a lot of the time.
Well, that's probably a big part of the issue, right? I feel like I know for people that it is like, how old are you, bro?
I'm 37.
37, right? So I'm
Yeah.
28.
Yeah,
So more so from your perspective, but even when I
sure.
was like 12, 13, it was like if you didn't want Domino's, you were getting in the car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Now it's like if you can't be fuck going to the servo, someone will do it for you. Like you can get a
Yeah.
pack of cigarettes and a 3 liter Coke and some cheesels and some engine oil and delivered to your house by a guy who won't even talk to you. He'll just put it at your front door and leave. And
Yeah.
that convenience has created a bigger problem for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think how we're talking about how much more people are the broken metabolism kind of thing. You know, people were just more inactive just about in all regards.
Mm.
Like you said, taking before escalators, taking the stairs, you know, people would rather, you know, at my gym, for example, I remember outside, I was doing some work and I could kind of see outside in the car park. There's a little car park in front of the gym, and there's the shopping center, which has got a massive gym. And this lady drove around fucking 4 times just so she could park in the the gym car park where she could have walked an extra 10 meters from the actual like shopping center car park to come in to the gym. And by no means at all was she an old lady or whatever, just wanted to park there so she didn't have to walk that far. So yeah, like you said, we're getting to a point now where things, we want everything we want is what we want it right now. And it definitely has its props, as you said, in convenience. Well, you put this up on your YouTube like straight away. Doing this kind of stuff, you'd have to do it previously over a phone call, or people would have to fucking write it out or whatever. There's obviously good things and bad things about it, but yeah, I think in the fitness industry, yeah, there's definitely need for things that make it easier for people, that there's less barriers to break down a lot of the like bullshit in the industry out there, but there's also things that we should probably just do a lot more of just because we need to be more active as well.
Yeah, I agree. And this is kind of going to lead me into a an interesting question because I feel partly like I know what your answer is going to be because we're both
Yeah.
being open minded and people can do their own things. But something's been more common along the same topic of what we're talking about now in the last couple of years. And I wasn't aware of it until I had someone I know talk about it. And all of a sudden, everyone around me was using it. And I was like, oh, which is interesting. I'm not sure whether I agree with that. And it started with something like the gastric sleeve, right? It was an interesting
Yeah,
one. People started getting that. I had a client get it for health reasons. And I was probably a little bit more supportive of him because he was probably, I don't believe anyone's too far gone, but he was a big
yeah,
guy and he had kids. And I kind of understood, right? He was like, I just
yeah,
want to be
sure.
there for my kids. And I was like, oh, from a health perspective, that's nice to hear. But then I started meeting people who were 15 kilos overweight and they were getting it. And I was like, oh, that's a bit premature. Do you think maybe? I mean, hey, look, everyone gets their own decisions, but that seems like a bit
Yeah,
much.
sure.
And then
Yeah,
I heard of things like Ozempic
yeah,
and different drugs that people would take to suppress their appetite so that they not only they weren't hungry, but they couldn't eat. It used to make them feel
yeah,
sick.
yeah,
And I started getting to a point where I was like, people can do what they want. I used to use a lot of drugs for sure. So I wouldn't
yeah,
tell people what to do. But if the conversation comes up, I think I got to be honest that I think I maybe disagree with that. I think they're sort of extreme methods, and I would so much rather someone learn, become educated, create discipline, and understand their willpower a bit more. What are your views on some of these? I guess uh, quote shortcuts, maybe we could call them.
yeah. I've had this conversation, as you said, it's been in the media quite a bit, and I have a lot of, I have clients asking me about it and stuff like that. So obviously, from the perspective of taking something that suppresses your appetite so that you don't eat as much food, so that you lose body fat, right? So, like you said, I definitely do think it's a bit of a quick fix, for people that aren't willing to put the work in to be able to actually change their habits. Now, I think like you talked about like the gastric sleeve and things like that. I feel in a situation where their weight was um to the point where it's just about like life threatening or to the point where it's causing a lot of issues, then maybe these things that need to be quite drastic could be encouraged, obviously, through a medical practitioner or whatever as well. However, like anything, if you don't actually change your behaviors um, around your lifestyle, you're just going to go back to them. And this is the issue with, if you look at things such as the Biggest Loser and, like even quick fat loss challenges and that kind of thing as well, lose 10 kilos in 6 weeks. They don't actually embody the identity of the person that is a healthy version of themselves. They're just kind of sucking it up for a very short period of time. So if you're choosing this very quick route to get the weight off or whatever, without the acknowledgement that you actually need to improve your lifestyle habits, you're just going to be a skinnier version of yourself for a short period of time before you actually start, you'll probably get back to where you were, if not worse, with worse relationship as well. So, giving out these, I would say, because I think it's with like the gastric sleeve and things like that. I think there's even like protocols in place these days for people to actually, um, once they get it done, they are taught, how to eat properly or how they should approach their nutrition and things like that, so their activity levels and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, it's a fine line because I know, like you said, everybody wants that quick fix, but a quick fix is not always the best option. If you put the time in, you if I could recommend any book from anybody, it's like James Clear's Atomic Habits, and that like reiterates, behavior change, creating better habits, how to reduce negative habits and things like that. And he talks about self-identity. So if you're getting this or using these types of things just for the sake of losing the weight, but you don't want to actually change your lifestyle that got you to that position, it's pretty shit on you, to be honest. Like as blunt as it is, if you're not willing to actually make those changes, and wanting to improve your lifestyle, your habits, be there for your family, friends, and be around for a long time and at a much healthier body weight or just feel better or stronger or whatever, it's going to be very short lived and it'll be very sad to see a lot of those people, in 3, 4 years time that were on it that are in a worse probably position than they were when they started. That was a bit of a ramble, but yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. It's definitely a nicer way of saying it than some people are saying it at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, maybe I
Uh,
just kind of that, yeah.
it's good. It's good because, like you said, there is an extent of like there's enough people on the internet getting angry and telling people how to live their lives. We don't need to contribute to that. Ultimately, if these people want to do it, they can. But I think being able to have like a healthy discussion from two people who work with people and teach people to do
Yes.
it, I guess you could say in a more natural way, right? It's just like, look, let's just exercise and eat better. Like, keep it that simple.
Yeah.
It just gets to a point where I think they start to see more issues come up, and I think they have talked about that. I do think that there
Yeah.
is, especially around these things like Ozempic and stuff, they're talking now
Yeah.
about side effects in the future, right? Because nothing is just sweet as, right? Like
Yeah,
not like
yeah, for sure.
there's always side effects from something, and then surely if you're consuming such a low amounts of food and you're not having the right nutrients, you're going to see effects from that, right? You probably have issues with, like you said, strength and bone
Yeah.
density and stuff like that. So to me, it doesn't really align with it, but it's a curious thing now because it's not a conversation I think we would have really had 5 years ago, right? I wasn't aware of
Nah, not at
anything like
all.
that back then. So I know,
Yeah, unless it was like Trent or something.
yeah. Well, I mean, well, funnily enough, though, it was Clen, right? Clen was a big
Yeah.
thing because it was like
Yeah.
I had clients ask me about it once, and I was like, yeah, look, I'm not only do I not have advice on that, I just, what I'm here to help you with. That's not involved in what I'm here to help you with. If you do
Yeah,
start
okay.
taking it, let me know so that I'm aware of it. But other than that,
Yeah.
like, I don't recommend that you take drugs. That's a weird question.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I also think that there's people for that too. There's obviously coaches that have clients that want to do that sort of thing, and so it's just
Sure.
like maybe you kind of can pursue it that way. And once again, that comes down to the individual side of things. Again, I think you've
Yeah.
for a lot of people been able to paint a pretty good picture of what you're about throughout
Yeah.
this podcast and the way you approach things. And I think it's pretty similar to what I think we're seeing more coaches now take a better
Yeah.
approach in terms of just people becoming healthier, creating a healthier relationship with food, and also just doing it where it's enjoyable. Because, as you said, let's face the facts, people who want to enjoy that stuff. I just saw the new muscle. I think you shared the Muscle Nation bar that they're bringing out.
Yeah,
Um,
so I think that's been in the works for a little while with Nick Vivita, so and chocolate, so that should be pretty yeah. I'm not sure when he's releasing it, but
looks
sounds like it'll
good.
be pretty good. Yeah, it should be
Yeah.
pretty good. We're gonna give it a blast for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think maybe as we finish up here, just at the end, I'd like to kind of like throw out some of the little diet maybe related foods or even just like some of the products people can have because I know I've got a couple lately. I've personally been
Sure.
dropping some weight, and so there's been a couple of things I've been clinging to that have helped get me through.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear some of yours because I mean, with the amount of recipes you do and comparisons you've got, you would have an interesting cupboard. I reckon a video on like what's in your cupboard would be cool.
Yeah.
Um, I am gonna start with I don't know if you drink a lot of do you drink a lot of like sugar-free soft drink?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, I get through my fair bit for sure.
Yeah.
Have my favorite. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'd be interested to hear your favorite. My current is the new Solo, the is it lemon mango, the no sugar one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I haven't had the lemon mango one, but yeah, rate it.
It's a game changer, bro.
Yeah.
Game changer. What's yours?
Well, like the absolute OG for me is like Pepsi Max. Like that's just been through all my competition preps, etc. as well. Um, like outside of that, bro, I was a pretty like I did like the vanilla Coke, no sugar. That was always a pretty good one, bro. And then, you know, just the general like I don't have a lot of energy drinks themselves,
Mm.
but that the peach one from Monster, that is like that's goat tier, I think, compared to all of those other ones for sure.
Yeah, I don't have any caffeine anymore, but when I was having them, I did like the ultra is it ultra rosa, the pink one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the
Yeah.
one.
They are
Yeah.
they are pretty good, man. They're pretty up there. And I mean, and there's a lot of products now they're making things a lot easier. And we started doing it. You know the PB2,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yep.
the chocolate one.
Yeah.
Uh, I put that in my YoPro now, and I like mix
Yeah.
it, and it just becomes like mousse. And I see it's such an easy, simple thing to do. And some people would probably be like, "Yeah, it's average," but to me, I put a bunch of strawberries in it, and it's like 250 calories. And like, man, I feel so full after a day. Like
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So like I'll give you a quick list of like these are the lower calorie options. So when I'm dieting, these are the biggest things that I'll probably stick to, right? So like yogurt, like low fat yogurt, like the YoPlay zero for me one. Obviously there's Chobani, YoPro. Now the other things would be obviously fruit, strawberries are your like your lowest calorie fruit, of course. And then if you're going to use zucchini, pumpkin, spudlight potatoes, they're always kind of a go-to just to fill the void. Again, though, like I said, there used to be a time where I would just absolutely spam the shit out of like low calorie things to the point where I just used to have such sore guts at the end of the day. Like, and it wasn't very comfortable, you know? So when I was on super low calories at one point, I was like, fuck it, I'd rather have a like sore stomach than be hungry. But the fact is, you're going to be hungry regardless.
Mm.
So, be mindful, I guess, a little bit more just how you're feeling with them as well. But what I would say, like, there's jelly light. That's always quite a good one. Jelly light, yogurt, some berries as well. Things that, again, people are often against the Pepsi Maxes or the artificial sweeteners because they'll give you cancer, but they won't. But if you do have a sweet craving, that's always, something that can fix that. Everybody's into these ninja creamies at the moment. You probably see them just spam your whole
Mm.
Instagram. I haven't got one yet because I've been in the building phase for the last like 18 months. So, but they look like if I was on lower calories, it would be probably a pretty good investment because the texture that comes out is pretty damn impressive. Because you try to do it in a in a smoothie machine to make like ice cream, right? And it's fucking just a slushy. It's pretty rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, like that stuff looks killer, but they're like fucking $400. Hey,
Yeah, I
they're
know.
pretty
Yeah,
expensive. I mean,
ex-
that they look good, and they look like you
yeah.
could just endless recipes of what you can do. But the thing that gets me at the moment, and
Mm.
I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times, is this fucking bark thing,
Oh yeah,
protein
bro.
bark. I like, I don't know, man. I kind of want to get on board with it. I'll probably try it, but
I
I'm not
made
gonna.
it. Yeah, I made it ages ago. Um, so you basically just have like either get like protein custard. Shout out to Muscle Nation with their custard's the best custard. But yeah, basically mix custard and yogurt powder together, and then you just kind of like lay your fruit out, or you can mix your fruit through, and you can just make. I just made these massive like fruit like biscuit kind of things, but yeah, it's a sweet hit. They're relatively lower calorie, and you know, I think one thing to keep in mind, I find before if you're in a dieting phase and you are struggling with hunger, look at your main meals first and just make sure that you're ticking all those boxes, high protein, plenty of fruit or vegetables, just to do that before. Because I got into a point where I was planning all my meals around my dessert, and I was like, I probably should get it the other way around. So, um, you know, make sure to tick those boxes, and then obviously adding in those other things as well, those little like sweet hacks, which is usually what people end up craving.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I just thought it was funny to be honest. It's just like
Yeah, for
it's just
sure.
I don't know, just eating like a big fuck off like frozen bark thing. It just seems
Yeah, I know
hilarious to me.
it's pretty random, mate. There's some random shit that's come out like with like hacks and stuff like that, like cauliflower, like oats, and like yeah, it's pretty wild.
That is pretty wild.
Even back in the day, and I'll admit to this, I fucking like this is 5 years ago, 4 years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and there was a thing where like you made zucchini oats, so you grated zucchini into your oats, and it just made it like volumized it heaps. Um, Probably never again. That's fucking looking at it now. I was like, just put those veggies in your proper meal. But yeah, it was again like education over time as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of that like eating like empty fluff now, hey. Like just like
Yeah,
these bowls of fluff and they're like, "Oh, there's like only 200 calories in this." And you just look at
yeah,
it and you're like, Fuck, man, I don't care if there's only 100 calories in that. Like that just looks like a like you said, looks like a stomach ache. Like I'm gonna get,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Digestive issues. Um, and that's something that's really been brought to light, as I said, a lot lately, and especially as I said, across my bodybuilding. Like as I said, the calories we get down to and the body fat we get down to, like hunger levels are through the roof. But at that point, like fucking nothing's gonna make you hungry. Like nothing's gonna fill you up. So you're just giving yourself a sore guts. And I often say to some people sometimes too, like lean into it a little bit as well. Like as soon as you start getting hungry, don't look for the biggest like food hack possible. And I say like, in your building phases and stuff, and I mentioned to a lot of clients, and we spoke about they kind of get into that higher volume when they're in dieting, and then they start translating that also into their when they're on high calories as well. I'm like, let's cut out a few of those things, replace them with some more calorie dense options, so that when you do go back to a dieting phase, you could use, you know, your spud light potatoes if you wanted to. You go back to normal potatoes, when you're in your normal phase, and you're not really changing the volume, you're just changing the calorie content of certain foods.
yeah, and financially, I think sometimes it's a bit of a relief too. Like I know I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to
yeah,
just fucking spending less money because it's just like everything's like $3 more because it's like
yeah, yeah,
lower
for
fat
sure.
or
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Fruit, even the frozen fruit, I just got through so much of that. That's 6, 7 bucks a bag.
yeah, that's not even that, man. I was buying fresh fruit here for a while. Then I was just
Oh,
like, it's fucking exciting. I was paid like $8 for some blueberries the other day, and I was like,
yeah,
what the
no,
fuck did I do that
yeah.
for? It was stupid. But what's your plans for bodybuilding, man? Before you go, are you going to continue again?
Yeah, so um I last competed at the end of 2022. And possibly maybe end of 2025, maybe. I haven't made the decision yet, but I kind of live a pretty like similar lifestyle to a certain degree. I have a lot more flexibility, but I surf a lot, do other activities and stuff like that too. So, it's just not all bodybuilding, but I still like, you know, consume enough food that I'm in a surplus. I prioritize protein. I train because I enjoy it and I train to get strong. So when you kind of add, and I, like to, get my sleep, practice what I preach. When you kind of encapsulate those things, it's just like inevitable that if I did decide to jump on stage again, I'd likely have acquired a little bit more muscle. And it's not that hard to transition in and out of it because I've done it so many times too. But I'm not just like you know, I'm not just bodybuilding is my only thing. And I think this year has, for me personally, has probably been a little bit less of that and more about helping people. Because I used to have a bit of quite a hybrid um, approach to my content and stuff like that, where a lot of it was my training videos or motivation and blah blah blah. And now you just look at my socials and it's just like, how much information can I get to, how much free information can I get to people to help them in any way possible, whether it's creating easy recipes, whether it's breaking down nutrition myths, whether it's just answering some questions, and helping them to get to their goals. So, coming from because you see a lot of very popular people on social media that are coaches, hundreds of thousands of followers, millions of comments and stuff, and you wonder why they're not very busy as coaches. It's because the fact that all their likes and comments are from other coaches and bodybuilders, like they're not from the market that they're trying to target. So, that was a big switch probably the last 2 years was to be like, though it's nice to be appreciated and people enjoy your journey and stuff like that, it's like my job is to help people and provide as much content as possible. So I really kind of lent a lot into that probably the last couple of years. So yes, I'm still bodybuilding. I post some more on my stories in my page, but yeah, maybe at the end of next year, maybe.
Yeah, cool, man. I resonate a lot with what you said too. I think it's
Mm,
you're making content for your clients or your potential clients, not
yeah.
other coaches, because that's people get trapped in that. We all get trapped in that as well. That's why it's like,
Yeah, yeah. And I don't
it,
think it's a bad thing. Like it's nice to be appreciated for what you've worked on and to show your journey. And people do take a lot of interest in that as well. Um, but it is again about trying to find that balance between the two as well.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'll be looking forward to seeing how you go with competing when you do it again. I know that it's a grueling process, and I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll have some even more interesting recipes come out of the woodwork when you're hungry and wanting to create something
Yeah,
special.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, but man, listen, I really appreciate your time today, and we got to it eventually. I thank you for your patience, and
No, that's all right, man. Pleasure being on you.
yeah, absolutely. I know you've got another one today, so
Yep.
hopefully that goes well for you as well. And anybody who has been listening, you can find Brett at Brett Carrington _coaching on Instagram. So they can go on and pretty much scroll your endless recipes because I think you're probably one of the most active in that space.
Yes.
And yeah, man, I mean, is there anyone you would like to give a shout out to before we go?
Um, not in particular, man. Just obviously appreciate your time today. Good to obviously get on the podcast. It's something that I've really wanted to kind of do more of. Like I'm a very um I like talking to people and opening up about a lot of, what I see in the industry and things like that too. So I appreciate the opportunity anyway.
No, absolutely, man. I'm glad that you're getting around a little bit more with it as well. And I think they create a different form of content for us now as well, where people kind of the content you're creating regularly or that I'm doing as well. This just allows people to see a little bit of a different perspective. And sometimes the way you might word something when you're conversing is very different to a video, right? We all try to script it well on a video and make something
Yeah.
sound a certain way, but this is going to come across a lot more natural, and it might give people a bit more of an insight into what you're trying to do and what your outlook on things are as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's only so much you can fit into a 90-second like Instagram reel or whatever as well, or through your story. So yeah,
Mm.
man, as I said, appreciate the opportunity for sure, man. And maybe down the track, we'll catch up for another one.
Absolutely, man. I'd love to do that. Maybe after the next show, and you can share us maybe we can delve a little bit more into that experience because I know some people, like you said, you work with a lot of regular people and people who just
Yeah.
want a bit of help with nutrition. But I think it'd be cool to get a little bit more of an insight into just some of the struggles that you'll go through during prep. We know that can be tough.
Yeah, for sure, bro. I think what would it be? It'd be like my fifth or sixth season, I think. So I've done about 12 shows. So I've done my fair share of trials and errors and things like that. So there's a lot that people could probably learn from my mistakes for sure.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm
All right.
looking forward to hearing more about it, man, and catching
Okay,
up again in
cool.
the future. As I said, if people want to find you, they know where they can do so. Thank you again for being here, man. And I'll just give a little bit of a shout out to Total Physique Performance, which is where we have done this podcast, and to all the sponsors that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So, Brett, you have a good day, man. Enjoy your next podcast, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it, eh?